Hey everybody, Matt. I'm back again. I'm just here to bring good business practices to professional services. I want to elevate the conversation here, talk about how to run these companies. They're different than a product company, and it's something we could talk about. Okay, so today I want to talk about the military. And I want to talk about the military because there's a lot of lessons that you can learn from the military that I think people don't think about. So I'm a veteran. I was an officer in the Army in the 90s, and I think people aren't tuned in to what the military does and what that's like because they don't think it applies to business. But really, I think that the military is the most challenging organizational thing that there is, and what they do can sort of inform you as to what will work in business when it's not life or death and the stakes are not so high. My experience in being an officer and everything is that the military spend a lot of time and they are continuously thinking about how do we run this organization better. So in the military, you have fire teams, you have squads, you have platoons and companies, and it goes up from there. When you become commissioned, then if you're an infantry kind of guy, which I was, then you go in and become a platoon leader in charge of, wait for it, about 40 people. Okay. So then once again, that breakpoint of 40 sort of comes again. Something around 40 changes where you need to add this level of management to the systems. There's all sorts of things I could talk about the military that could apply to business, but I'm going to talk about one that I think is super important, and it comes out of the Air Force. And how does one jet beat another jet? A modern jet has all these sensors. It has now their stealth and everything. There's so much stuff. Okay. And this all feeds into this concept called OODA or OODA. It's OODA, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. It's the OODA loop. So you take the action. Now you need to observe what's the new situation. So Orient is really like, what does that mean? Once you know what that means, you need to quickly decide what it is you're going to do. And then the act is sort of the result of those first three steps of the process. Then you do it again, then you do it again, then you do it again. But if you're going faster than your adversary, they are still reacting to the last thing you did while you're already on to the next thing. As an example, I don't know if anybody remembers the Iraq War. The United States military, using these principles, had Iraq where they didn't even know what was going on. They thought they were winning, and they had the spokesperson come out and just say things that everybody knew was wildly untrue, but they were so beaten in this information technology loop that they were still days behind. And then the US military showed up in Baghdad and they didn't even know that they were close by. Okay, so this applies in business all the time. One thing that a Breakpoint 40 kind of company can be really competitive in is being able to observe, orient, decide, and act before their competitors can. A new technology comes out. You observe that technology. You figure out what does it mean. You decide what you're going to do. You act. The marketplace changes. You do that thing. So when this whole process is running quickly, then you're going to be first to everything. And then not only are you first, but then when you start doing things, you're the first one to then make adjustments and make adjustments and make adjustments while everybody else is still figuring out what's going on. So all of this stuff, if you think of your company as like a jet that needs all of these sensors and needs all of these information technology, and it has to present it to the management team in a way that they can understand what's going on so that they can make a decision, because you can't skip these steps either. You can't just observe and act, because if you're acting without orienting and deciding, then you're just doing stuff randomly. And you'll be wondering, why is it I see what's going on, I'm doing things, it's not working. It's a big reason to invest in information technology. It's just, how does the knowledge flow around in your company? Smaller companies always have an advantage because there's just less people involved and information moves around faster. And then as you grow, that's when you start needing systems to facilitate all of these things. This is the lesson from the military. How do I observe, orient, decide, and act faster and faster and faster? And let me give you an example of how that could be improved. In my earlier days working in the professional services, we would have a monthly meeting where we would go over all the reports. And so then you're looking at what happened in the previous month. And then usually it would take about 2 weeks before we could actually have that meeting to sort of analyze what happened in the month before and then talk about what needs to be done. I think that's probably pretty typical. A new system was put in, and then now you could do the report because it wasn't a person who was having to pull all these things together and then analyze this data and munge it into a report. There was a system now where you could even look before the month was finished and get an idea where you were going to end up. And you could do that ad hoc at any time because of the system. And then at the end of the month, the meeting that would normally be 2 weeks later, you could have that meeting the next day or a day later and already see everything. If we look at this as the OODA loop, you went from a 6-week process to a 3-week process where in week 3, you can already start seeing and having some visibility of where you're going to end up and then even start making decisions. So now you've got 3 loops. It's where you only had one long 6-week loop with a 2-week delay. So that's how you get an agile company. Well, like I say, all of these things that I'm talking about are all intertwined. So we're going to keep attacking and talking about different pieces of it, and we'll keep trying to put them together. Thanks. Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by Bazinta. Bazinta is an all-in-one cloud platform for professional service firms that combines time tracking, scheduling, invoicing, project management, and real-time reporting to help teams run operations more efficiently and improve profitability. For more information, click the link below.